Hey everyone, happy Monday. Tara Talmadge alongside Mike Irwin. And despite the holiday, we are here because we have to answer the people's questions.
No matter what happens, we have to do this.
Always.
It never stops.
All right, well, let's just jump right to it. I know we've got a lot of baseball questions this week, and our first question comes from Tom Arkansawyer, who says, if Arkansas were to win a national championship this season, do you think that reinvigorates DVH and he stays at least 15 more years, or does he retire after reaching the mountaintop? I don't even want to think about him retiring, but how long do you think he wants to continue the grind?
Wow, those are two extremes. 15 more years,
15
or
years
he stops right now.
Time. I don't even know if, like, even if they did win, and he chose to stay, 15 years is a long time for him.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Remain the
And
head coach.
as far as if they win the national championship, would he retire now? I mean, only he knows that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not inside his head. His wife might know. I don't think so.
I don't think so
I think one of the issues here is that he's kind of done what I call a slow build. The program has been good since he's been here, but it's just kind of gotten better and better and better. It didn't just shoot up through the roof.
Yeah.
And the last 3 or 4 years, he's sort of gotten up into that top 5 perennially.
Yeah.
And now when they've got this new Hunt Development or Performance Center, and it's got all this state-of-the-art stuff for pitchers, and all this stuff they do with their hitters where they go around with these goggles on and they can bat against anytime they want against the pitchers they're going to be facing. All the stuff that they've got, coupled with the kind of season that they've had, you got to believe he can recruit. He's already been able to recruit. They're probably approaching right now in baseball Alabama levels in football, where you're just going out and getting really good people all the time. So why would he want to stop?
I agree.
When you've got that right there. If it looked like things might not last, maybe. I think what he's really looking at is a thing like the old timers will remember Cliff Gustafson at Texas in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. He was winningest coach of all time, won like national championships like some teams win regular season games. And so he's got all these wins. Then you've got Skip Bertman. They just did a big feature on him on the SEC network, and he did kind of in the early 2000s especially. He was dominating college baseball and again won multiple national championships at the expense of, among others, Arkansas when Arkansas first got into the SEC. I just remember all these times that they would come, LSU would come in here and just beat Arkansas like a drum, you know, and then you go there and they beat you like a drum. So I think Dave Van Horn wants to be like those guys. You know, set records, win multiple national championships if you can. And so nobody knows what will happen if he wins that first one, but I think he will say, I want more.
Yeah, I think he's still got several more years left in him as the head coach of Arkansas. All right, Eddie Lynn asks, what do you think about the field for the Fayetteville Regional? Who will the Hogs play in the Super Regional?
You know, I just got through watching some of the stuff on the SEC network where they're breaking down Tennessee's regional and how they just got shafted.
Brutal.
They've got all these, you know, teams with good power rankings in there. Arkansas came off looking like just great compared to that. Right off the bat, you've got this. I got to look this up every time. New Jersey Institute of Technology.
NJIT.
It's almost like who, what?
We all Googled it.
And then when you start looking at it, it's even crazier. I mean, they started off like 3-12 or something. And they did end on a 9-game winning streak. But they have 2 divisions in this American East Conference, and they were in Division B. What kind of a conference goes Division A and B? It makes it look like the guys in B are terrible.
Right.
I don't think that's the way it was. I think that's just the way they chose to make it. Instead of East and West, they went A and B. Like weird.
We're in the B team. I don't know.
So, but they finished second in their own division. So how'd they get in? Well, this is one of those conferences where the only way you're getting somebody in is an automatic bid. And the automatic bid comes from the conference tournament, and they won the conference tournament by default. And how do you win by default? Well, you're sort of in the game, the championship game, but you're behind. But it starts to rain, But because the other team would have had to beat you twice, I think that's the way it worked
Right,
out. Then
yeah.
they go ahead and just say, well, okay, you win because we can't mess around with this bad weather anymore. We don't want to come back the next day. So that's the strange way they got into this thing. So now we look at the other team that they're likely to play after they beat those guys, and that would be Nebraska. Now, Nebraska plays in the Big Ten. The Big Ten is so politically correct that not only did they play conference only in football last year when all the COVID stuff was going on, these guys decided to do it with baseball too. So they played a conference only baseball schedule, and what was their record? 31-12, pretty good. But when you look at the Big Ten in baseball, you know, it's kind of the weakest of the Power Five baseball conferences. They're up there in the north. They start later. You know, they don't have as much time outside to work, even in the fall. And it's hard. I'm sure it's hard to recruit up there. None of those teams were ranked. None of those Big Ten teams were ranked. And so this doesn't look like a tough tournament field.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you can just walk through it. You're going to have to play baseball. But I think they win this regional. I don't see an issue here like Tennessee has in their regional.
Absolutely.
Then when you talk about who will they play next, they're paired with the Louisiana Tech regional. And if you'll recall, Arkansas went to Louisiana Tech early in the season and took 2 out of 3 from them. At the time, everybody's going, why did you lose to them? They actually ended up being a good team. But you're going where the host team, you've already won 2 or 3 from that team, and then the only other team that probably could come out of that regional is Alabama.
Yeah.
And you've also beaten them 2 out of 3. So you probably couldn't get a better thing on paper to get to the College World Series. Again, there are no guarantees, and there is this 1 seed curse. The 1 national seed doesn't win the College World Series. It's been forever since that's happened. So that's creepy. I don't like to talk about that. But as far as the regional and super regional, I don't think you could ask for anything better.
Nebraska is a good 2 seed, though, coming in.
Maybe.
They're not as competitive, like you mentioned,
again,
as
if you
Tennessee
look at their conference, and the problem with trying to figure them out is they haven't played anybody outside their own conference, so you can't compare that. You can't say, well, they went and played this SEC team or this Big 12 team and they got hammered or they beat them. They just played each other. And all we know is that they're the best team, and they didn't have a conference tournament either, so it's based on regular season. They played a whole lot of conference games, didn't play any kind of tough non-conference games. So again, I think it was a pretty. I think the committee did them right.
Yeah, and honestly, I was looking at some of the stats from all of the teams that are going to be coming to Fayetteville this weekend, and on paper, none of them stack up to Arkansas, like even remotely close.
Sure.
So let's hope it goes well. All right, Dr. Stark says, the college umps have been awful from what I've seen. Do you foresee the NCAA ever moving to the electronic zone? And if so, when? Has Dave Van Horn ever been asked his thoughts on the issue that you know of?
He probably has, and I just don't remember it. I certainly don't remember him talking about it, but this comes up from time to time, so maybe he's been asked about it. I hesitate to say you will never have an electronic zone in baseball because things change over the years. Attitudes change. They might come up with some super duper machine that can just do it with 100% accurate. They can do all planes and everything, and so they just know and nobody questions it. To me, that almost takes the fun out of baseball because if you can't yell at the umpires on the strike,
what are you doing?
Can't get guys mad, can't get guys kicked out of games, coaches kicked out of games. I can't sit here and yell at the TV screen, so I just don't see it happening anytime soon. I can't predict what will happen 50 years from now when I'm not around.
Right.
So, but we don't think it's happening soon.
No, I wouldn't say never. All right. Nash WPS 18 wants to know, what are the chances that Kevin Papps can win the Golden Spikes? I know it's rare for a pitcher to win, but Papps is also rare. It'd be insane for recruiting. That's for sure.
I think I talked about this last week when somebody asked me, and I said if he would be Player of the Year, and I said, or Pitcher of the Year in the country. I said, give him the Golden Spikes Award. Now, here's what I think has to happen for him to win that award, because you're right, it is rare for the pitcher to get it. He's going to have to. Arkansas is going to have to win the national championship. I think that's essential. And he's going to have to continue to pitch and have the impact that he has up to date. You know, he's 10-0 with 10 saves. That's 20 games you've impacted. let's say he wins 2 more games and gets 3 more saves or whatever, then all of a sudden you're really looking at it and you're going, there's nobody that impacted college baseball the way he did. So I think he's got a shot, and maybe they don't have to win the national championship, but I think since he's a pitcher, that may be what has to happen. And I wouldn't say he's not going to do it.
Isn't it crazy, though, to think about that? Because Kevin Papps is just like, we've watched him over the past several years. He's been through so much, and it's just all of a sudden he's one of the best, if not the best, players and pitchers in the country. It's wild.
I mean, it's just like you didn't have any money and all of a sudden you're the richest guy in America. But he seems to handle it right. He's not walking around acting like a big shot. He laughs. And
he's one of the
very humble.
I remember we used to do interviews with him, and he was just very quiet and timid, and he's still like
he's
that.
Coming out of it
he's
a little
coming
bit.
out of his shell a little bit.
That's good.
All right. Hot Atlanta Hogs says, I would love to see the Hogs included in some major November/December basketball tournaments, which would be good experience and for NCAA seeding and strength of schedule, like the Maui Invitational, Battle for Atlantis, etc. Anything like this in the works/scheduled for 2021, 22, 23, or beyond?
Well, first of all, they don't do basketball schedules like they do football. Where you look 10 years down the road. They've just announced Arkansas is going to play Notre Dame in
2028.
2028. I mean, come on, that's way down the road.
Mark it down, people.
But there are a couple of tournaments in the next 2 years, starting this year, this fall. They're going to something called the Hall of Fame Classic in Kansas City. It's not a glamorous location, but the field's pretty good. Let's see who's there. Cincinnati, Illinois, and Kansas State. And the way they bill this is there's 3 national championships and how many 21 Final Fours among those teams. No way to know how good all those teams are going to be right now, but it looks like a good field, and it may make some of those fans happy that were mad last year when they were complaining about the bad November, December schedule that Arkansas played, which turned out to not be so bad after all. But I guess when you look at this, you'd say, yeah, that's a good tournament to be in. And then 2022, Arkansas goes back out to the Maui Invitational. Arkansas has been in that 3 previous times, and they've never won it. Nolan came the closest. His 91 team, which was ranked number 2 in the country at the time and should have won it, they got knocked out by Michigan State. And then I think in 2005, Stan Heath went out there, and his teams went 1 and 2. And then Mike Anderson, 10 years later, 2015, went out there again 1 and 2. So the good thing is, 2 years from now, 2 seasons from now, maybe Arkansas can go out there and win that Maui Invitational for the first time. And I'll go.
Yeah, I was about to say, you want to nominate yourself?
I'll go.
We'll both get some credentials and go on down to Maui. I don't think
I've been to Hawaii once, but I've never been to Maui, and so I need to be able to go to Maui. They have this big volcano called Haleakala.
Okay.
And it's like huge, and then you have to ride a bicycle up there, but you do. And then you get up there, and they have this thing called transmogrification. I've read about it. Now, you don't know about that.
No idea.
Transmogrification. Here's what that is. They say that if you stand on the top of that Haleakala crater and you look up, and if the clouds are doing a certain thing on a certain day and the sun's just right, it projects your shadow up into those clouds, and you become a giant person in the sky.
Wow.
And they say the people that have been there lucky enough to be transmogrified think it's really, really cool.
I bet it would be really, really cool.
It's an inspiring moment. So I want to go there and see if I can do that.
That sounds like an intense bike ride, too, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I might not be able to do the bike ride. Just have you drive me up there.
Yeah, there we go.
I'll get out and go get transmogrified and then ride the bike
come back down.
Yeah, just coast on the way down.
I'm down. All right, Said76 wants to know, what do you think Danny Ford didn't, or why do you think Danny Ford didn't win more at Arkansas? He had recruited some good players, but it just didn't translate to wins for whatever reason.
Well, first of all, he really was a good recruiter. He was a good recruiter at Clemson, although some say cheated. The people I know there say he didn't, but some of his staffers did. But he was a good recruiter here. He recruited a lot of the players that Houston won big with that first. Houston Nutt won big with that first year. Almost beat Tennessee at Tennessee. I think Tennessee may have been number 1 at the time. And then I think that Arkansas shared an SEC West title that year. And those were with a lot of guys that Danny recruited. So if he recruited well, why did he have so much trouble? boy, this is complicated. And it comes from talking to people that knew him for a long time, people that lived next door to him when he was here, a lot of things like that. Danny Ford grew up believing that you perform best under conflict situations, and he liked conflict. But he didn't just like conflict with the people you're playing against. He liked conflict with you and your friends. So he had a lot of conflict on his staff, on his team, and I need to explain this a little bit so people can understand it. I think it was maybe the '96 season, the year after they went to the SEC championship game. They had a guy named Oscar Malone on their team who was a running back. And they were at Auburn, playing Auburn. And Robert Johnson was the quarterback. So on a third down situation, they're going to throw a screen pass. And Johnson, as the quarterback, is supposed to drop back, suck the pass rush toward him, and then we've all seen a screen pass. If it works properly, they come to you, then you loop the ball over them, and you've got the offensive line moves out in front of the running back. He catches the ball, and he goes downfield and gets a first down, maybe scores a touchdown. Well, what happened in this case was Robert Johnson didn't drop back like this. He got the ball and took off toward Oscar Malone.
Oh, no.
And he ended up throwing like a 3-yard pass, like
dink pass.
Well, what happened was everybody went with him.
Oh, no.
So when he caught the ball, they were all standing there like, okay, now what are you going to do?
Right.
So he obviously doesn't make the first down. So Arkansas had an offensive line coach named Larry Vanderhayden.
Okay.
And Vanderhayden and Danny went way back, but Vanderhayden had gotten a lot of heat that year for his offensive line. You guys don't block, this is your fault, whatever. So he's mad, I guess. Yeah. So Robert Johnson comes off the field after really blowing the play, and Vanderhayden said something to him, and then Vanderhayden went nuts. And he ran over to Danny Ford, and there was a big thing there, and then that's all we knew. Okay, so they lose the game. We're at practice either the next Monday or the next Tuesday. I'm with Grant Hall, who's covered Razorbacks longer than I have. And we're looking around, and Grant says, well, where's Vanderhayden? And I'm looking, and I say, I don't see him out there. So we go up to Danny after practice, and we say, well, where's Coach Vanderhayden? I mean, it's like weird that your offensive line coach is not at practice. And he doesn't say anything, kind of mumbles and walks off. So we know something's up.
Right.
Well, we find out there's some kind of press release 2 or 3 days later that Vanderhayden is no longer on the staff. They never gave any real explanation. He's just gone. Yeah. So I always wondered about that. So 2, 3, 4 years go by, and I see Oscar Malone at the mall. And I say, hey, man, I've always wanted to know what happened in that Auburn game where you were supposed to catch that screen pass, but then Robert screwed up, and then when they were coming off the field, Vanderhayden goes nuts, and then he's not there anymore. What happened on that deal? And he said, Vanderhayden was really mad because his offensive line had gotten criticized all year, but this was a case where it was Robert Johnson's fault. So he said to Robert Johnson as he walked by him, hey, do you know what a screen pass is? You're not supposed to lead the defense over to the receiver. And supposedly Robert Johnson said, blank you, old man, and walked on by, and it was Danny Ford is standing right there, so Vanderhayden says something to him. Now, I went back after Oscar Malone told me this, and I got out the video, and I looked at this whole thing, and it's just the way he described it. You see Robert Johnson walk by Vanderhayden, something happens, Vanderhayden runs up to Danny Ford, like, did you hear what he said to me? You can't allow that. And then I guess Danny didn't back Vanderhayden up, and so Vanderhayden decided to leave. Well, this is a thing where, to me, Danny Ford didn't mind a little conflict there. Right. Didn't mind the coach saying something to the player, didn't mind the player saying something back to him. Don't have to kick him out or suspend him or anything. Let's just fight and go on. Okay, so that's one incident. And then there was this other deal where it was his last year. He had this guy, Kay Stevenson, as offensive coordinator, and Frank Broyles felt like Danny's offense wasn't good, and that's why he wasn't winning. So he forced him to hire an offensive coordinator, and he ends up with this, and I guess he felt like he had to go to a passing game, and Kay Stevenson had been in the Canadian Football League, and he was big on, just pass the football. Then you have Miles Aldridge, who's the defensive coordinator, and he's kind of on Danny's side, and he's mad that Kay Stevens has been brought in here, Stevenson, so he doesn't want to help him.
Okay.
So now it's spring football, and Kay is having to install his offense, and it's really different from what they've been running.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically, because I talked to him about it one day, the first time they went out there was a big brouhaha, and everybody got mad, and they're yelling at each other. So I went to Kay when the practice was over, and I said, what happened? And he said, well, I went to Miles, the defensive coordinator, and I said, hey, you got to go a little easy on us because I'm teaching these guys this offense for the first time.
Yeah.
So don't do any blitzing or anything like that. And then what happened? He blitzed us the whole time, and we just blew up, and we got nothing out of the practice. He said, I don't know who this guy's coaching for. It's not our team. That's sort of kind of like the conflict that went on.
Right.
I talked to another coach on that staff after this was all over, and he said, we always fought with each other, especially offense and defense. I think Frank eventually found out about this. That's one of the reasons he fired Danny. But the long and the short of it is, Danny liked arguing, and he didn't see that as an issue, and it is an issue if it's on your staff, if you got players mad at each other, coaches mad at each other. That's not good. Argue with the other team, not your own teammates.
No, I agree.
Seems kind of crazy, but that's sort of what happened.
All right, Mousetown says, I noticed that you posted some negative thoughts about Vanderbilt on Twitter last week during the SEC baseball tournament. What is it about Vandy that you don't like?
Well, what I don't like about them doesn't have anything to do with what I tweeted, so I'll talk about what I don't like about Vandy.
Okay.
They cheat legally. Most baseball fans know that there's this 11.7 scholarship limit for baseball, which is stupid because you've got to have around 30 to 33 guys on your team, especially the pitchers you need. So how do they make this happen? Well, almost nobody gets a full ride.
Yeah.
It's difficult. Vanderbilt is a private school, and as such, I guess there are different rules. I don't know. I'm still not sure how they do this. I do know that they've got this program called Project Vanderbilt, which has been around 10 or 12 years, and what they do, the school itself, so it applies to athletics, tuition at Vanderbilt, an exclusive private school, if you have a degree from Vanderbilt, that's pretty big deal. But the tuition is $80,000 a year.
Yeah.
They've got a deal where your tuition will be based on your family income.
Okay.
So what they've been able to do in baseball is every year there are a lot of kids that come from low-income families, and there's no way they can afford to go to play college baseball because they're not even getting a full scholarship.
Yeah.
Their parents would have to kick in, and they can't afford to do it. So what do these kids do? They go straight to minor league baseball and take their bonus money and go on. Well, Vanderbilt gets around this by saying, hey, we'll bring you in here with what's your family income, and then they determine, okay, you only have to pay this, and then because that's not going as a part of the scholarship money that person would have, they can apply more of it to their room and board, and the end result is they can get more players and better players and give them more aid because of the way they do this than a typical SEC school. And I've never understood why the conference puts up with this, but they do. They've done some things, and I don't want to get into it, to help some of the other schools, but it's still not really equal. The only thing I can figure out is they think, well, we got to have this private school in the SEC because it's got great academic reputation, and they don't win in anything, so we'll let them win in baseball. That's the only thing I can figure out. So that's that.
Yeah.
The issue I had with this past week in the tournament was that everybody, the SEC network guys, a lot of local people, people that cover other teams, I was all over social media, Twitter, looking at this stuff. Everybody was talking about the Arkansas-Vanderbilt game was the game of the year in college baseball.
Oh yeah, everyone was excited about that.
And I'm going, well, wait a minute. Vanderbilt lost 3 conference series. They finished technically 4th overall in the SEC standings. And to me, Tennessee was the best team in the SEC. So if there's a game in the year in college baseball or in the SEC, it should be any of the 3 previous times that Arkansas and Tennessee had played, not this one Vanderbilt thing. And then Arkansas beats Vanderbilt, so Vanderbilt's out. And again, Tennessee and Arkansas make it back into the championship game. I still think those are the 2 best teams
agree.
in the SEC.
I agree.
So it was just a reaction to that. I don't know how you can just proclaim Vanderbilt to be the second best team in the league when the stats don't show it out.
I think it was mainly the pitching
Maybe.
matchup.
Okay, but look what happened to their pitchers.
No,
In the SEC tournament, their freshman pitcher got their only win. Those two guys, Rocker and whatever the
Lighter.
they lost.
Yeah.
They both got losses. So sometimes you can get hung up on who somebody is and not look at logic. And so, if you're out there and you think Vanderbilt's the second best team, there's still people think they'll win the national championship, I guess. But that was my argument. Stop saying this is the game of the year when they maybe have already played the game of the year, or they may just be about to play the game of the year.
I agree. All right, Rob's4516 says, I've seen some of the national media pick Arkansas to upset Texas this fall. What are your thoughts on the game?
Ever since Mac Brown was fired, what has Texas done? They go and they get these high-profile coaches that win, and they pay them a lot of money, and then they bring them in, and then they fire them.
Yeah.
They just keep doing that. Now, Texas, if they don't have the biggest athletic budget in the country, it's second biggest or third. They're way up there at the top. Huge revenue. They generate tons of revenue. They recruit about like Alabama. They have their choice of all of the good players are in Texas, Louisiana. I mean, they're loaded every year. And Oklahoma embarrasses them every year. Why is that? I don't know, but Texas is underachieved. So they keep thinking, okay, we're going to hire the next guy that's going to stop that process, going to turn us around. So here comes Steve Sarkisian. Okay, so he's been at Alabama with Nick Saban. But if you look at him as a head coach, he's barely above 500 as a head coach. I think he was up at Washington for a while and did okay, but nothing special. At USC, he ends up getting fired because he's got a drinking problem. There were some of his own staff members went, I guess, to the athletic director and said they thought he was drunk at a game, and all this got him fired. So maybe he's rehabbed and all of that. But what I'm saying is, look how strange this is.
Yeah.
Maybe Texas went, well, we've been hiring these obvious guys to turn it. Maybe we'll hire a guy that's not so obvious.
But even then, you're still paying. Like, I mean, how many people tried to get Steve Sarkisian?
I know.
And so you're still getting a huge name.
Yeah, you're getting the big name and you're paying him the big bucks.
But
he's just
Texas still just hadn't done
well.
well.
As a quarterback's coach and an offensive coordinator, he's unquestioned. He's good. But we all know that doesn't make you a good head coach. He does not have a good track record as a head coach. So now he's coming to Fayetteville. And so what's this game going to be like? Well, from Arkansas's, both teams have lost their quarterback from a year ago, and both had good quarterbacks. So I think a lot of what happens in that game will be who does the best job developing a new quarterback. And some of that's going to be hard to say. I would like to see the first game of the year from each team to answer a question like this, and maybe we'll get it. I'm sure we will get it that week. It's just hard for me to say how that game's going to come out, but my basic instinct right now is Arkansas will win, just because I just question what's happened there and who they've hired now, and the fact that they don't stick with a coach through some rough seasons. They might have done fine if they're just firing people left and right, trying to get back to what they had, and they fired Mac Brown. So. What a place.
Yeah. All right. TexHog188 asks, what's the story behind Musk getting a new marketing title? We're all kind of wondering.
I thought initially this is a tongue-in-cheek thing.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny.
Because he's always tweeting and pushing his own, kind of marketing his own basketball program.
Ideas and stuff.
And so I think he just, okay, I'm gonna go tell Hunter, hey, somebody's gonna make me up one of those door plaques, door plates, and put it on, and it'll say that, and then I'll put it on Twitter, and we'll laugh about it. So I asked, and apparently it's a real deal. Now, they didn't tell me whether or not he gets any extra money from this, but the important thing is he's apparently been given permission to hire a staff to market through social media the basketball program. And he's advertised for that. So I don't know if they fill those positions, but if you're interested in working for Musselman, I hear he's a real mean guy. You might not want to work for him.
I think he's very passionate about what he wants.
Yes, he is.
All right, Hog is mad and says, A 1 p.m. kickoff Labor Day weekend for Rice is just wrong. Why would anyone think playing in literally dangerous on-the-field temperatures in August is a good idea, especially since it's only on the SEC Network Plus?
First of all, I'm not really worried about the players.
Yeah.
Look, here's the players. They work out all summer in the heat.
Right.
They've got all these trainers that have been taught all these classes on heat exhaustion. They know all the signs.
Okay.
They know what to do. It's not a problem for the players. It's a problem for the fans.
Right, who are just roasting out there.
So here's what happens in a game like that. And it happens every year. You get one of those hot, unusually hot, late August, early September weekends. And then you're the team that's playing the 1 o'clock game or the 11 o'clock game or whatever. Fans show up and it's not going to be full because the wife always says, maybe it's the husband in some cases, but usually it's the wife saying, I'm not going out there when it's that hot. You're crazy. So the guy he doesn't have to be talked into it. Okay.
We'll stay.
Because you just stay home and watch it under air conditioner and then cool weather. So you already lose some fans because it's that hot. Then what happens, and this is personal observation. So people come to the game and they sit through the first quarter and then you see them get up and start leaving.
Slowly start trickling out.
And then by halftime, a whole bunch of them have left.
Yeah.
Because it's just too hot. So I really wouldn't worry too much one way or the other, because if you're not comfortable as a fan, you're probably going to leave.
Yeah.
The reason for this is simple. It's because all the games are on TV. In the old days, before every Arkansas game was on television, this game absolutely would be at 6:30 at night when it was cooler. That's the way they always did it. They didn't play a Saturday afternoon game until well into the season and the temperatures weren't bad. But when you've got everybody playing, there are also only so many time slots.
Right.
You can't tell everybody, okay, we'll all play at night.
Yeah.
There's just not enough airtime on different media that carries these games to do that. So it is just a byproduct of having every game on television. I don't think we're going back to the old days when you were on TV once a month or once a season or twice.
Yeah, but moral of the story, I think the players are going to be fine in the heat.
Players will be fine.
All right, Swine American says, I am troubled when I see an Arkansas kid like Desi Sills go to Auburn after playing a productive role for the Razorbacks. Do you think that Coach Musselman understands that Razorback fans want to see the real talented Arkansas kids stay here instead of bringing in some one-and-done mercenary?
You know, I think what the average fan wants to do is win games.
Right.
And I haven't heard anyone that I've talked to call Justin Smith and Jalen Tate mercenaries.
Yeah.
They were only here a year, but the fans loved those guys.
Absolutely.
And they really liked what they had to say when the season was over. This is a new thing, bringing in grad transfers and bringing in one-time transfers because of the one-time transfer rule. This is the way Musselman recruits. He reloads. He doesn't go and get a lot of freshmen and then hope they'll develop over the next few years. He will get one or two, but he's gonna always make sure wherever I need experience, an experienced player, I'll go find that guy.
Yeah.
And it's not like the old days, but I think people will slowly get used to this. It may take a while for some of them that are used to it being done the old way, but it makes it a lot easier when you're winning. I can see people being furious if you bring in grad transfers and they don't win and they don't play well.
Right.
But these guys so far are. So I just don't see that it's going to be a huge issue moving forward.
Yeah. All right, James Hogg wants to know, how much of setback was COVID for the athletic department? Money is one, but what other ways has the athletic department been set back? With the resuming of recruiting and stadiums reopening, are we officially back to business as usual, and will there be lasting impacts because of the pandemic? Lots of questions.
Yeah, well, first of all, the recruiting, I don't think there's any evidence that it hurt recruiting.
Right.
Arkansas got a lot of credit for being able to do virtual Zooms with players, which apparently that was enough because a lot of guys committed during that period, having never visited campus. Now that's over. We're starting in-campus visits like now.
Right.
So the best news is they made it through all of that, and it didn't really affect recruiting. So what did it affect? To me, the biggest effect was something a lot of the fans will never notice, and I'm going to do a series on it later this summer. there were some very key people behind the scenes in the athletic department that ended up having to take early retirement.
Yep.
And that, to me, will have a long-term effect. But you'd have to be over there every day to understand how important that was. You start with a guy like Pat Berger, who was the guy that handled all their grass, their turf, the real turf, not fake turf.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, he's the guy that there were all these complaints. There were problems with Razorback Stadium because the south end zone is so tall that as you get into the late September, early November, into that period, the sun is down below the stands as it crosses the sky. And the north end zone, that Bermuda grass doesn't get any sun and it starts to die.
Yeah.
So he went out and did research and found a shade-tolerant Bermuda that had been developed at Oklahoma State, and they bought it and they brought it in and they put it down 2 years ago. Yeah. He was good at that. I mean, if you ever looked at Baum Stadium and the field they had there, the practice fields that they had for football, everybody knew Pat Berger was the best. And he ended up having to take early retirement. Now, he didn't retire. I think he's at a junior college right now, and it won't be long till somebody picks him up because he's very good, but Arkansas doesn't have it. And I noticed people complaining last year about the way the field looked, the football field. Well, this is what happens when you have to get rid of somebody that's that good. And they did have to do it because they had money shortfalls. So then you talk about a guy like Bobby Allen, who goes all the way back. He was on Houston Nutt's first staff, I think, goes all the way back to the late 90s. Over all of those years, he had a great relationship with high school coaches. And so he was the director of high school relations. He's the guy that had to keep high school coaches, hey, yeah, our coach is great. He likes you. Yeah. If you got any players, we want to come and look at them. And you couldn't have a better guy. And he had to take early retirement. So, you know, you lose something there. You lose a lot of experience. Yeah. But to me, the biggest loss, and it may be hard to explain this unless you saw this up close, there were 3 secretaries over there, and they were there for over 30 years, some of them close to 40 years. Yeah. So I knew them all that time. You had the basketball secretary, Terry Mercer. You had the football secretary, Clorinda Carr, and you had the sports information secretary, Marilyn Gibson. They all knew each other. They were all friends. You want to know what really keeps an athletic department going? It's the secretaries. Yeah. I could sit here all day and tell you stories where they intervened and did certain things and helped coaches out. And it's just a fascinating story that I'm going to try to tell this summer when I talk about those 3 ladies, but they ended up having to take early retirement. And it won't be the same. I promise you. It may take a while. You can't replace 40 years of experience of each of those people. Yeah. So that's where the problem came in with COVID. And Yurchek didn't have any choice. They ended up with, I think when it was all said and done, they ended up $35 million short in revenues from loss of live gate revenue. You got to make that up somehow. So all the coaches agreed to take pay cuts, and these people who were making the most money in their positions because they'd been there the longest agreed to take early retirement, and they were replaced with new people who aren't making nearly as much. Yeah. That's the way you save money. There is one good thing about all this, and that is that the SEC, just last week I think it was, they somehow worked out a deal where they took the future revenues from ESPN and the money that comes in for football, and they kind of borrowed against it, and they're giving each school $23 million. Yeah. It's kind of a no-interest loan. Right. You know, you won't get that money in the future. You'll get it now with the idea that hopefully you can get things going again. And so I say all this to basically point out that they really need to fill that stadium up next fall.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
That would be huge. It's not, and it's helpful that people are excited. Yeah. And you got a game like the Texas game, but it would be nice to have that Rice game almost full.
Oh, of course.
They need to sell as many tickets for football as they can. I think basketball is going to be sold out. I really do. And baseball probably will be. So those are the 2 other major revenue sources. So it's really up to football to kind of get them back on track and help make up what still financially they have to make up. So COVID had an impact, but look, they got through it. They won, 9 conference championships? Yep. That's incredible. And I said this earlier, and I didn't have Arkansas in mind when I talked about COVID. I said, the coaches who do the best job of managing this, keeping their players safe and from getting COVID, they're the ones that are going to benefit from this, and Arkansas turned out to be that team.
And I will say,
that program.
I think Arkansas as a whole has done, like the university has made it through COVID in terms of money losses probably better than many other universities have been throughout that entire pandemic. So
And probably less impacted by players that couldn't play
too.
because of COVID.
Yeah.
They had one game postponed in football, but it got played. I don't know of any games that got canceled that weren't played at all.
No.
They played all games. The only time anything was postponed was because of the opponent. There was some baseball this spring, but it wasn't because of Arkansas. So they handled it. The athletes, the coaches, the trainers, they all handled it really well.
All right, we've got one more to go, so let's end today's Ask Mike on a bit of a lighter note. So the Bionic Pig asks, which mismatch was worse? Number 1, Todd Day versus Larry Johnson. Number 2, U of A boosters versus Gus Malzahn's agent. Or number 3, LSU athletics versus NCAA infractions committee.
Okay, I love this question. Okay, the Todd Day, Larry Johnson thing, for people who don't remember, Larry Johnson was a huge forward for UNLV, he was like 6'7", 240.
Yeah.
Todd Day was tall and skinny. And Todd Day got mad at him in this game at Barnhill Arena, and he drew back like he was going to hit him. And thankfully, a lot of people jumped in and stopped it. That would have been the biggest mismatch, but nothing happened because people grabbed them and prevented it from happening. So that's out.
Okay.
The LSU versus the NCAA infractions committee, come on. They're eventually probably going to catch them for the recruiting violations in basketball and probably football. But here's what they'll do. It'll just be minor punishments. The NCAA likes to go after some school for infractions on women's bowling.
Yeah.
You know, they pick some weird,
just
bizarre
random thing.
Yeah, New Mexico State cheated in golf, you know, and then they're on probation. So I don't think LSU will get hit hard because they're too important, you know, to the revenue. I mean, their games are on TV; they're a big draw.
Yeah.
So that's not really that's kind of a draw on that deal. So we're left with Gus Malzahn
and
as agent and Razorback booster. So Jimmy Sexton just wiped him out.
Yeah.
It was a total mismatch. He just came in and said, "Oh, hey." Here's what it'll take to get Gus to Arkansas. And they finally ended up with this. He got him to $7 million a year for 7 years. He turned around and then went to the president of Auburn and said, okay, Arkansas is willing to pay this.
Right.
And Auburn went, okay, we'll pay it.
We'll do that.
And so Gus got rich and Sexton got richer than he already is.
Yeah.
And Arkansas got the booby prize. They got Chad Morris. So that was the mismatch. Total mismatch. Don't tangle with Jimmy Sexton if you're a booster.
I was going to say,
he's a slick
he's very good at his job.
Used car salesman.
All right, that's going to wrap up the Ask Mike for this week. For Mike Irwin, I'm Tara Talmadge. Thanks for all of your questions. We hope to see you back here again next Monday.